The good news is that at Los Alamos, they no longer store atomic warheads, so we no longer have to worry about explosions or anything like that. The problem is radioactive waste, essentially plutonium-contaminated waste, because plutonium is found at Los Alamos. Plutonium is one of the most toxic chemicals known to science. A particle, a microgram that you can't even see, lodged in your lungs could cause lung cancer. And that's the problem. There are between 20 to 30,000 barrels of plutonium-contaminated waste, everything from gloves to clothing to fuel rods, and we have to be very careful about how that is treated and what happens in a fire. Well, right now, most of the radioactive materials have been secured, so we can rest assured that the bulk of materials, the particle accelerator, the reactors, and radioactive materials have been secured on site. What we're worried about is what happens when fires go right into these buildings and perhaps pop open many of these 55-gallon drums. At that point, plutonium dust could in fact start to rise from the fire and be swept downwind. Most of the contamination will be within about 10 miles or so, and again, it's going to be low level for the most part, but it is quite toxic and it's something that we have to worry about. For the most part, the bulk of sensitive materials and the bulk of sensitive equipment have been secured even beforehand because we've had plenty of warning. The last big fire was about 11 years ago. However, no one has fully tested everything under real conditions of a fire. In other words, we are in the middle of a science experiment. We really don't know how many barrels will go up. We really don't know how many buildings will be destroyed and how many safety systems will be breached in case this fire really goes out of control. In 2009, the Department of Energy issued a report stating that because of the sophisticated nature of equipment and because of the radiation stored on site, the local fire department and volunteers and whoever comes may not be fully cognizant of all the equipment and all the safety procedures. So as a consequence, it may be that that's the reason why they're sending in technical crews, not necessarily because they have to secure wayward warheads, but because we're dealing with sophisticated equipment and radiation, and that may require specialized crews being sent in. I think all of us should have our ears glued to the radio because right now things are getting worse by the hour. However, if the fire stops at the gate and does not go into the laboratory itself, then of course we can breathe a sigh of relief. However, if the fire starts to penetrate into the laboratories, then it's a sign of concern. Then we don't really know because the government has not told us which buildings house which amounts of radiation. The government has been rather tight-lipped about that, and we simply don't know the location of all the nuclear materials on site. One of the main purposes of the Los Alamos National Laboratory now is called stockpile stewardship. That is to monitor and maintain and improve the status of our nuclear warheads. That doesn't mean they have direct contact with warheads, but that means they have to do tests on plutonium, tests on radioactive isotopes, and that's a cause of concern because if the fire really gets out of control, even buildings that are totally locked down may suffer a breach. And at that point, radioactive materials may go into the air. We're not at that point yet, but but it's something that we have to take into account very seriously, and that is what happens if the fire spreads to the very heart of the laboratory. And at that point, we have to cross our fingers, hoping that, quote, secure sites remain secure.